We spend so much time in the gutter on this show, mostly thanks to TJ. We explore pee-pee and poo-poo and rarely take the time to enjoy the finer things in life. Tonight, allow me to introduce you to my personal favorite fine artist, iconoclast, 27 Club member, boundary breaker, and love maker. Jean-Michel Basquiat gets deep fat fried.
Deep fat fried!
Some hoity-toity episode, huh?
Hey.
Some hoity-toity episode.
I never thought I'd live long enough to cover some weird Frenchman on this show, Paul.
Ain't a Frenchman.
Yeah, we don't.
Born and raised in America.
I know what
Well,
his
then
name is.
Why is his name Jean-Michel?
I don't care what
Because he
lie
was
they
made
made
better
up
than
about
you.
him.
Damn.
I don't care what lie they made up, Paul. He's a Frenchman.
Well,
He's a damn no
unfortunately,
French son of a bitch.
the facts don't care about your feelings, Scotty.
They ain't feelings, Paul. They facts.
Jean-Michel Basquiat is pictured here on the extreme right. You can see him as a tween. That's with him with his father and mother and his younger sister. He's born in 1960. Jean-Michel Basquiat grew up in Brooklyn, New York, not France.
Paris, France. Paris, France, sorry.
He was in a wealthy middle-class family, went to private schools. His father, an accountant, drove a Mercedes. His mother, a New York resident of Puerto Rican descent, and his father, a Haitian, separated when he was 8. His mother took him and his sisters to many galleries throughout his childhood, so kind of got introduced to art at a very young age. Plus, going to private schools and shit kind of like exposes you to those things in a way that public school doesn't. His mother was
the real education, like most things in America, is behind a paywall. So,
of course, within 3 years, his mother was admitted to a mental institution, which she would be in and out of many times in the ensuing years. Basquiat was known as a precocious, gifted child who was taught by his mother and became fluently trilingual. He spoke and wrote in English, French, and Spanish. So this is something, by the way, that's true of almost all high artists. When you look at visual artists, almost all visual artists that attain international acclaim and are known as masters of their craft are at a minimum trilingual. So I think Picasso spoke English, Catalan, and Spanish. So shit like that. Just something. It's an indicator of somebody with a mind that
they're also, they're also disproportionately left-handed. I don't know if Basquiat was.
I don't believe he was, but that is also true. At first, he expressed interest in becoming a cartoonist at age 6, something that maybe TJ could empathize with. I know that you have.
Yeah,
maybe you never had the ambition to be a cartoonist, but you're definitely.
Yeah, I never was like, I want to be a cartoonist for a living, but I've always liked cartoonists.
And you made like little.
And I used to draw little comics and shit. I guess I still do.
All right. So it started maybe in the same way. So by grade 10, Basquiat had kind of bucked what you would expect from somebody that comes from such a privileged background, dropped out of school, ran away from home. He cited emotional and physical abuse by his father. He was adopted by a friend's family. He couch surfed and lived sporadically on the streets of New York and Washington Square Park. He would hang with winos and addicts, panhandling and picking up change off the ground and in clubs. While working in the art department of a unique clothing warehouse, he became a graffiti artist by night, developing a name Samo, which stood for same old shit.
So it's same old shit. I gotcha.
But he immediately stood out amongst other graffiti artists because rather than painting a piece of art or just putting his name on something, he would write these little ironic pieces of poetry around town. You can read this one. Which of the following is omnipresent? Harvey Oswald, Coca-Cola logo, General Millinery, Samo. So this was, this is one of his like check it off, and he would often answer it himself. It was actually he and a friend of his that were both Samo. I can't remember the name of the friend, but he and a friend both would do these tags under the name Samo. It's kind of like a little art project by them.
I guess the friend didn't go on to be famous enough to have a GFF episode, probably.
No, he didn't. And in fact, that friend was given a special piece of art by Jean-Michel Basquiat, paintings that were inscribed to him from Samo by Samo. And while Basquiat was still alive, he sold them. So he's a piece of shit.
Well, might just needed some money.
I'm sorry though, dude. I'm sorry, dude. If you grew up with a fine artist and they give you a fucking piece of art directly for you, unless you're hard up can be, you don't sell it.
If it comes down to like, well, I can eat or I can have this fucking $20,000 painting or whatever.
Let's just say it didn't.
Yeah. So we call him a piece of shit.
He's a piece of shit.
Fucking bastard.
He admits it himself.
He's the same.
He calls himself an asshole for selling it while he was.
Well, I mean, you knew it. It said same old. His name. I mean, the name he went by was same old shit, right?
You should have definitely waited until he died, until your buddy died, because
that's just smart business.
It's always worth more afterwards.
Of course.
And these artists.
This was also something that, as we'll get into it, was a particular blow to Basquiat, who felt like towards the end of his life he really didn't have friends anymore because of how famous he had become.
Too famous for friends.
So while he was working in the art department, as I said, he started doing a Samo graffiti. He's essentially a self-taught artist. He later said, "I don't listen to what art critics say. I don't know anybody who needs a critic to find out what art is." A huge influence on him was William Burroughs, who was known for like cutting up. I don't know if you've ever heard of this. He would like write something, and then he would cut the page in half and then cut it in quarters and rearrange the phrases and put the page back together. And it would create these kind of like spontaneous pieces of poetry.
Yeah. No, I've heard about that.
Were not intended. You know what I mean? So like you would put this imagery together and it would create this poetry. So he really loved William Burroughs. Huge influence on his work. Basquiat called his style boom for real. I
like that. Boom for real.
Yep.
That sounds like a fake weed name, Scotty. Like when Scotty used to fucking like do like fake names for the weed we got, because you never know what the fuck your weed actually is in Louisiana. So Scotty would be like, "This shit here is what they call the razzle dazzle."
This is white lightning.
I can see Sky being like, "This shit here is called boom for real, buddy."
Well, the reason I put that in there is because, when you look at his art now, it's often classified with hoity-toity shit like neo-expressionism or something. But if you look at other examples of neo-expressionism, none of them look like Basquiat. None of them did the things that Basquiat did. So he's really not like a classifiable artist. And we'll see that as we look at his art here. But yeah, he included multimedia and words in his art. He would write on his art, leave little messages like this as part of the art. And that's not neo-expressionism at all. Nobody else did that. It was just Basquiat, right? So I say that he was a boom for real artist, the only boom for real artist. Started out as a graffiti artist. Al Diaz was the name of the asshole that sold his art. That was also Samo.
Good on you, Al.
He would strategically place his graffiti near galleries and museums where artists hung out in order to make a name for himself. In 1978, the magazine Village Voice congratulated him for getting noticed in this manner.
Yeah, no shit. Fucking, that's some hustle. That's a good strategy, because all kinds of artists be coming around there. They're like, "Oh, what's that? That's how come this dude's
Samo
shit? It's just Samo shit all over the fucking place. It's crazy."
Yeah, not a bad strategy. Obviously, clearly paid off for him, at least as far as getting his name out in the world.
True.
Yeah, Scotty.
True that. Excuse me.
Is your name out in the world, Scotty? No.
Not compared to.
Because you're garbage,
Basquiat.
Scotty.
Well, I didn't invent my boom for real art style yet, TJ. I'm still working on it. Any day now.
Hell yeah, dude. Well, he already invented boom for real. You need to invent.
No, I said
else.
my boom for real.
Oh, Scotty's boom for real?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
I'm not saying his. I'm saying, mine.
Scotty's new different neo boom for real.
Yeah, boom for real.
Neo boom for real style.
So one of his first steady girlfriends pictured here was named Suzanne. She met him while she was a bartender. She actually has a pretty cute story that's told in a documentary about his life, where he would come into the bar and just stand there. He would like stand around, because if you sat down, you were expected to order a drink, and he couldn't afford it. And then one day she invited him, like, hey, are you going to sit down? You know, because she'd seen him like days in a row coming in. He sat down, he ordered the most expensive thing on the menu, basically spent all the money he'd panhandled to try and impress her. And that's how he got a date with her, was he ordered Remy Martin or whatever the fuck.
Yeah, there you go, man. It's all about creating the illusion, I guess.
So Suzanne let Jean move in with her, and additionally initially tried to get him to get a normal job as an electrician, but Basquiat like couldn't handle it. He was like, I just feel degraded by doing this fucking type of work. I go into this lady's house today, and she treated me like a fucking Negro slave or whatever, and ordered me around, and I was working in some rich white lady's house all day, and I don't want to do this shit. And so,
because he is artiste.
Right. And so basically they came to a mutually beneficial agreement. He would be an artist and she would be a waitress. You know what I mean?
Right. And then he would, have sex with her. Boom.
So in these early days, of course, he was broke, and so was she, because she was paying the bills and feeding his ass on a bartender's salary. So he couldn't afford canvases. So he would go out into the kind of busted up areas of New York and find doors and windows and just kind of steal them off of old derelict, apartment buildings and tenements and shit. And he painted on them. And these artworks, by the way, are some of the most valuable of his works of art today, because it's early Basquiat shit. He also started doing these little postcard pieces of art, which are also worth an obscene amount today, and selling them for like $5 in Washington Square Park. He sold his first painting entitled Red Man for $200 because of his incessant self-promotion and knowledge of where to be. He was always around artists, always putting himself in front of artists.
Whoever bought that made a wise investment.
Yeah.
$200 for his first painting.
Every day I'm hustling.
Well, his first painting he sold.
Yeah. During this era of his life, too, while he was still relatively unknown and basically a couch surfing street kid, he also started a band. Now, this seems weird today, but back in this time in Greenwich Village and the New York art scene and all that shit, it was like everybody had a band, everybody was a painter, everybody was a sculptor, everybody was an actor, everybody was a poet. You know what I mean?
Right. You're trying to make it on like multiple fronts at any given time. Like, one of these is going to hit. God damn it.
Free form artistic expression. It was all about free form artistic expression. That was the order of the day. Right.
Yeah.
Everybody tried everything. It was about just being creative. And so he created a band called Grey. It was named after Grey's Anatomy, which is his favorite book, and would go on to influence his work in a profound way.
Too bad it's now a terrible TV show, and that's the first thing I think of.
Yeah, true that. So his book, the book Grey's Anatomy, was given to him by his mother while he recovered from being hit by a car at age 7. Another huge formative thing in his childhood. He was almost killed by a car. Was in the hospital for a few months recovering from it, and his mother bought him Grey's Anatomy to read. And at a very young age, he became obsessed with human anatomy and the way it was portrayed in Grey's Anatomy. And that snuck into his art, once again, as we'll see. But we're talking about the band Grey. He started it with his friend and filmmaker Michael Holman. They met at a Canal Zone party in 1979, which was a graffiti showcase that was organized by Holman. Basquiat showed up while sporting a partially shaved head in an attempt to obscure his identity as Samo. Later on in the party, Basquiat revealed his identity to Holman and proposed, like, hey, dude, want to start a band? And because Holman knew who Samo was, he was like, oh, sure, I'll start a band with you, Samo. The problem was that nobody in the band could play an instrument.
That is a challenge.
Basquiat himself would play like this screeching type of note on a clarinet. and somebody would pound on a synthesizer, and there was a guy that would beat on a drum. It was just, like hyper experimental music.
I love the fucking balls of being like, all right, we're a band. I mean, none of us can play an instrument, but like, who gives a
that
shit?
hasn't stopped bands in the past.
Boom, 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 boom. Like, all right, this is amazing.
But because he used synthesizers in his music so early in 1979, Gray is still referenced as a pioneer in electronic music.
Dope.
So they used what's called a WASP synthesizer back in the day, named after being big, yellow, and black.
Cool, man.
And it was one of the first commercial synthesizers to use digital technology and be usable on the fly by musicians. And so Gray was one of the first bands ever to put out an album that used electronic synthesizers. So even though it's not a very well remembered piece of art, still a pioneered piece of art.
Something. Yeah. You go on, Sham 69, rule okay.
The pioneers are not always necessarily the best users of a technology.
True that. One of the regular venues that the band Gray played at was the Mud Club. I think I got a picture of that. Yeah, this is a Mud Club party here. 1970s New York City. It was legendary punk rock venue known for pushing the boundaries of what nightlife could be. The space was home to the arts and creative expression. And the list of guests who walked through the front door reflected that scene. Musicians like Grace Jones, David Bowie, Mick Jagger, Debbie Harry, Fab Five Freddy, Marianne Faithfull, the Ramones, the Talking Heads, Nico, fashion people like Anna Sui, Betsy Johnson, Gia Caragni, artists Keith Haring and Andy Warhol, and literary stars like Allen Ginsberg and William S. Burroughs. All of these people were known to be routine visitors to this little dingy club. So it was like the center of the art world, basically. Like all of the important artists in America basically found their way to this club and spent time in it.
And if they want to be seen, it's like, oh, we're going to the Mud Club.
Right.
That's one of those kind of deals.
This is where all the hip people go.
Yeah, hip people go to the Mud Club.
And of course, Basquiat being the brilliant self-promoter and knowing how to position himself was also a regular at the Mud Club. He spent all the time he could afford to there. He met Madonna there. Madonna was an early visitor to the Mud Club before she broke huge. Yeah. And Basquiat had a brief relationship, like a brief affair with Madonna.
He fucked Madonna in the pussy.
Yep. Madonna later went on to describe Jean-Michel as too fragile for this world. His days playing in the band Gray wouldn't last long, though, as his artistic career soon kind of took off. So Gray got kind of thrown in the, all right, Gray didn't hit, but the paintings are hitting.
Seems like my paintings are going somewhere. So fuck you, Gray. Gotta go.
So it was in 1981 that a prominent gallery owner, Anina Nosé, took an interest in Jean-Michel. At the time, she also taught at the School of Visual Arts, and Basquiat and his friends would sometimes hang out there, obviously knowing how to position themselves around other artists. She was first exposed to his art at the New York New Wave show at PS1 in Queens, which was basically a show that would put up anybody. Like if you drew something on a piece of fucking cardboard, they'd give you wall space there. It was meant to be like a amateur night for art, right? Well, he brought shit like this to it. And Anina Nosé was like, okay.
Those are huge pieces.
Not only that, but the quality and hand on these pieces, whether you like the style of his art or not, are just fucking second to none. Nobody paints anything that looks like this. And she immediately recognized his immense talent. So eventually Basquiat got back to her. They met at his girlfriend's house, and Jean-Michel kind of gave her a tour, which at this time, you guys remember I told you, he was living with his girlfriend, painting on doors, painting on any surface he could. He painted their whole refrigerator, which eventually was sold as a piece of art. They took the refrigerator door off and sold it as a piece of art.
Yeah, of course.
And so Anina Nosé walks into this shitty roach infested apartment. And as soon as the door opens, it's like art wonderland in there, right? There's clearly this fucking insane genius is living in this house. He's painting this insane shit on everything. And she's fucking blown away. So she asked if he had any like actual paintings. He said, I don't have money for canvas. You know what I mean? So no, I do it on doors. I do it on windows. And so she bought him his first stretch canvas and said, make me a painting. Actually, she bought him 3. These are the 3 that she bought him. She said, make me a painting. He made these 3 paintings within like a couple of days. And she was absolutely fucking blown away. And so she offered him residence at her gallery, gave him a workshop, and basically paid for him to live and provide him with paint and privacy and as many canvases as he wanted. And he was, you know, he descended to that level now. He's an artist in residence, right?
Right. Because he finally found someone who's like, whoa, okay.
Right.
I'll believe in this.
She's like a true patron of the arts, and that's like, hey, this guy's got some really unique style. And I mean, these canvases, like, whew, these are hugely expensive canvases. Like, even to buy something like this today is probably like $500 or $600.
Well, the canvas like and the oil paint used on it.
Oh, the paint. Oh, yeah,
expensive, right? But
yeah, that's a huge investment in somebody. So you really have to believe in somebody just to say, hey, like, I'm going to give you this and basically give you a means to support yourself. And I mean, eventually, obviously, I'm sure I made him a ton of money.
Oh my God. Yeah. So like I said, she gave him this workshop. Basquiat described it as a large space, lit by a skylight and assistants. Hey, he had assistants who restocked his supplies. He blasted hip hop and classical music, which used to drive Anina Nosei crazy, by the way, because people could hear it from the gallery. And she'd like stomp on the floor to try and tell him. Apparently, one of his favorite songs, I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, is Bolero by Ravel. You've probably heard it before. Dun, 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 dun. If you heard it, you'd probably fucking understand it.
It sounds familiar, but
yeah, I can't.
It's hard to, I'm just croaking it out. If you listen to the Ravel by Bolero, I can almost guarantee it's a very sweeping, bombastic piece of music. And
I like that. So
she claims that like he would just play it endlessly down there, and it would drive her fucking nuts. But of course, she liked making money, so she didn't really make that big of a fit about it. He would finish 1 or 2 paintings a day when he first started, which was insane output for a fine artist. One of his assistants described his work ethic as 24/7, with Jean-Michel frequently going in and out of the gallery at odd hours when inspiration would strike him. It was a time of rapid growth for his practice, which adopted a more confident neo-expressionist style. Or Boom for Real, if you
Boom for Real style, please.
Right. So created during that period was this painting called The Irony of a Negro Policeman. It's a biting critique of those who serve the powers that oppress and exploit them. So in the work, the police officer pictured wears a hat that resembles both a cage and a top hat, which is associated with Baron Samedi, Haitian voodoo spirit of death. His eyes are rendered as wide, frantic pools. In the right-hand corner, Basquiat scrawled the word pawn. 2 years later, he would create another enduring statement about police brutality, the painting The Death of Michael Stewart, also known as Defacement. So he pulled from his experience being black and put that up on the canvas. That wasn't the only inspiration for his work, but many of his works have woven into the many and varied themes this kind of environment in the 1980s that black people were living in, where they were.
Thank God things are so different now.
I mean,
right?
think about you think about his life story that you just told us. I mean, living on the street. I mean,
I am sure he had plenty.
I'm sure he had plenty of interaction.
Well, think about this though. Coming from wealth. Coming from a good upbringing, private schools, then hitting the street and seeing how little his intelligence and talent got him, versus other people.
To anybody. Yeah, because you're just stereotyped like you're just a black kid on the streets. You're a freaking hobo. You don't matter.
So this is So Basquiat's employer, Anina Nosé, filled an entire back room of her gallery with his work. Every piece sold for $2,500 a piece. Eventually, she sold enough of these to give him his own studio in a different building on Crosby Street. In 1982, Jean-Michel had his first exclusive art show at Anina Nosé's gallery. He invited his dad, and certainly exceeded his father's expectation. Every piece of art sold out that night. His net was $200,000, which in 1982 that's 1982.
Yeah, I mean that's
money.
it's really a pretty meteoric rise at this point, because like he literally went from guy on the streets who can't sell a fucking painting,
graffiti artist,
to selling just like to just churning out paintings at a rate of like 2 or 3 a day and selling all of them for fucking $2,500, $3,000, $4,000, that's $2,500. You know,
I mean, that's pretty impressive. You hold your first showing, your first gallery showing, and literally just every piece you have just sells out whatever price you're asking, and you can really just see why. I mean, like, just looking at it like this, it's like, I don't know. I've seen a lot of like works of art that try to be this and try to just be like, look, it's it almost looks random, but when you look at his style, it just has a different sort of feel to it. I don't know.
If you look at his
art, familiarity with it.
This is one of the pieces of art that has it on it. In the documentary Radiant Child, which was made by one of his close friends and has really a lot of exclusive interviews and footage of him, it talks about how no artist was more abusive of their own work than Jean-Michel in history. He would literally walk on his pieces. Like, he would paint this shit on the ground and he'd have it all laid out on the ground in different areas. And he would just walk across his paintings to paint on another one. And then he'd get another idea and he'd walk over to another painting. And so a lot of his artwork has like sneaker prints. So
well, there's like a real like air of like franticness and like just like fucking I'm making fuck that, you know, like I sense a lot of like freneticism and like anger and that kind of shit, just like coming across. Like you can almost feel like the process just looking at it, because it's so fucking raw and like he would elemental and shit.
He would paint something with that very strong hand. And a lot of his assistants would look at it and think they saw the painting taking shape, only to paint completely over it and put something else over it. It was like the whole paint. So some of these paintings are thick with other paintings underneath them, as he completely defaced his work and would end up with something like this, right?
Yeah.
So nobody that I know of paints like this. No artist in the history of fine art that I know of had this particular style.
I love the obnoxious liberals.
That's the name of the painting, I think.
Well, that's the title of the painting. Yeah, this is obnoxious liberals. Yeah.
My commentary on his life at that point.
I love how it's copyrighted too. It's obnoxious liberals, copyright.
There's a joke in that documentary that says you can date Jean-Michel's work by what kind of, like, how expensive the sneakers he was wearing are. Like, you look at the sneaker print.
The sneaker print,
yeah. If it's like cheap ass, like worn down Vans, you know it's an early work, and if it's like expensive ass Armani shoes or whatever the fuck, it's a later work. You know what I mean? So let me see here. Some acquaintances remember him spending tens of thousands of dollars a time on drugs during this time. So he got this money and pretty quickly developed a cocaine addiction.
I mean, the 80s, right?
Right.
I mean,
just going from like, dude, like when
he's in like
this guy has obviously got like issues and shit, right? So
he's around a bunch of artists,
like most artists do.
He's now rich. He's in the largest city in America, where this is like, it's a new party drug that's just like sweeping the nation.
Plus, like the scenes that he was probably like rolling in at the time, drugs are super commonplace. So of course, who the fuck doesn't want an escape from this horrible tainted reality anyway?
You don't think his buddies at the Mud Club are home getting fucked up all the time? Come on, it's called the Mud Club.
So at this point in his career, as we were saying, he developed a cocaine habit. Friends around this time and associates, say that he would just spend thousands of dollars on cocaine. expensive liquor, expensive food. He would throw parties at his house that were just filled with like all the delicacies of New York. You know what I mean? Because he just had money coming out his ears.
He's
like,
flexing at this point.
Right. He's a money factory, and he doesn't know how to deal with it because he's never really had it. Right. He saw his parents have like a middle class income, but they worked a fucking straight job for that shit.
It's one of the hardest things when you hear about these stories is that, you know, that's why you hear the rise and the fall of somebody, because the rise is so meteoric. Like he went from street kid, graffiti artist, and a couple years later, he's living like wherever he wants to in one of the most expensive cities in the world. Money is not even an issue. And it's like, what are you going to do with all this money? And he's not someone that, I mean, most artists aren't people that are like, oh, I need to save this money away, or I might not always have this money, or my production might go down or whatever. It's just like, enjoy life. Live life, and you have people around you that are influencing you as well. Like, dude, you have all the money in the world, you can do whatever the fuck you want. And coming from deprivation to everything, this is a very common to overindulge in all of these things.
Absolutely, and he did that, and then some. He bought all the most expensive electronics. He had the hi-fi stereo and the best speakers, and you know what I mean. Just everything, all the finer things in life. Art collectors would visit Basquiat in his tumultuous loft to acquire paintings, but he had absolutely no patience for those who he deemed were looking at his art too superficially. If you walked in there more concerned about like, hey, could you make me a painting that matches my couch? He would literally throw you out of his apartment and dump milk on your head as you left out of the window. Cool. Like, He was not told what to make. He didn't mind art collectors coming and watching him work and looking at his studio and making offers on his paintings and shit. But as far as like you coming in and going, oh, I love this work, but could you do something in a bright red? I've got a studio apartment that I'm just dying to make a red. You know what I mean? He was just like, fuck you. Get the fuck out of here, cunt. You can't buy anything. Fuck out of my apartment. I'm not selling shit to you. And then as they were walking out the door, he'd be waiting for them in the window, and he'd dump something on their fucking head as they left, just to make sure they got the goddamn fucking point.